Get Well Wednesday. Get your questions ready for the doctor. September is National Sickle Cell Awareness Month. And we have the Admiral. Brett Joie is the 16th United States Assistant Secretary for Health, the United States Department of Health and Human Services. Admiral, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. It's great to be here.
Where are you from originally, Admiral?
I'm from right outside of New Orleans, down in the middle of Cajun country.
Oh, okay, so you're a Saints fan.
Well, I'm a Saints fan, but I'm really diehard Cowboys fan. Don't hurt me for that, but I love my Cowboys.
Yeah, you should be hurt for that.
Well, you've been in a lot of pain for years.
Yeah,
So.
That's right. I have been. I know it. We all know it. You can feel it, too.
Speaking of pain, we still haven't found a cure for sickle cell anemia. How long has sickle cell anemia been around that we know of? Seems like 100 years.
Well, we can now trace it back. The first person with sickle cell trait was 7,300 years ago, believe it or not. And it's been over 100 years since we really discovered, it's really the first molecular disease we discovered what really caused it.
And you still
it's been around for a long time.
Still can't find a cure.
Well, let me tell you, people can be cured now, but it's not an easy cure, and it's not available to most people because you can be cured with a bone marrow transplant.
Oh,
but
yeah.
That's really hard to do. But let me tell you, there's some great things on the horizon, and within the next 5 or 10 years, my NIH director, Francis Collins, and all his team says there's really probably going to be a very widely accessible cure that doesn't have the risk of a full bone marrow transplant. So things are looking good.
What does that entail? Or can you give us an idea of what that looks like instead of the bone marrow transplant?
Well, there's all these new technologies now. Sickle cell is as bad as it is for people. It's just one single mutation out of your 3 billion chemicals that make up your DNA. So we now have technology to actually fix that. So that's getting started. So actually to fix that problem that's in your DNA so people could make normal cells. But the good news is until then, and we all hope for a cure, there's lots that people can do to make themselves live a pretty normal life. And there are about 40 new drugs that are in the pipeline now, one that just got approved last year and one that looks really, really good for next year that could help people out a whole lot.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that every black person knows a black person with sickle cell and has seen them or heard of them going through a lot of pain when they're having a sickle cell, what do you call it? A crisis. Okay.
You got it. Of pain. It is really, it's really a lot of pain. The blood cells for patients with sickle cell, they don't flow through the vessels really well and they get stuck. And that causes a lack of oxygen to a lot of places. And just about every organ can be infected. And you are right. The pain that people with sickle cell have can be really bad. It's acute. It comes on out of nowhere. And it's really hard to get rid of. And, I'm urging everybody around the country, and in fact, the government's done a pretty good job of that, is we're concerned about people, abusing opioids and all that stuff. But people with sickle cell really do need their pain medicine, and they really need to get the medicine they need when they need to get it.
So, Dr. Admiral, you got the trait, the sickle cell trait, and what is it?
And the disease.
And
the disease. Okay.
Right.
So what's the difference? The trait and the disease. What is the difference in sickle cell trait and disease?
Yes, sir. So as we talked about, sickle cell disease is a genetic disease. So if you get only one copy of the sickle gene, you have sickle cell trait. Now, most people can be absolutely normal with the sickle cell trait, but if you get really dehydrated or extreme to altitude, or any kinds of extreme kind of things, you can get sick too. You can get sick, but it's really rare. Sickle cell disease is when you have 2 copies of the abnormal gene. You inherited one from your mom, one from your dad, and that gives you the full-blown disease. And you're generally get symptoms from early on in your childhood, and it lasts your entire life.
And people with either the disease or the trait should not marry each other because their children.
Well, not marry, but
will have children.
Well, no, I don't want to say that. That gets a little bit in an area that I don't like. I mean, should 2 fat people not marry each other because they're going to have a kid that's more likely to be have obesity and die early. I think that's a judgment. I think what we need to do is inform parents so they know, and there are ways to test if you have the trait, or even make sure that the baby you have doesn't. But so we want people to have information. But I wouldn't, I think it's a little bit hard to say if you don't have the trait, don't marry each other. I mean that, or don't have children. That's a little bit far for me. I think everybody's got to make their own judgment about this. There's lots of genetic diseases out there. And lots of risks, and we just need to be careful about that kind of talk, in my mind.
Do people still get blood tests before they get married?
Well, not.
And the reason why I ask that is because that's how you find out. Usually, you find out at that point,
right,
about the trait and that sort of thing.
Exactly. So right now, and it's been this way for about 20 years, is that everybody in the United States is tested at birth for sickle cell. Mm-hmm. So you will know if, and that's very helpful to have that. And if you don't know your status at any time, you can certainly get tested. It's a very straightforward test, and you can, if you're not sick, you don't have the disease, but you might have the trait, and you could easily have the trait, and that's something you might want to know. And again, there are preventions that if a man and a woman want to know and they want to prevent for sure their child from having sickle cell, there are things you can do to make sure that doesn't happen.
Okay, one last question, then we'll turn it over to the texters. What about diet? Yeah. Can changing your diet prevent sickle cell?
Well, I want to emphasize that having good nutrition is really important for everything. It really is, and it's important for you to be healthy, and your baseline health is really important for sickle cell. As it is for everything, as it is for your heart and your lungs and, your brain and everything like that. The one thing that people with sickle cell need to be really careful of is they got to be hydrated. If you get dehydrated, it really puts you at risk of your blood sticking in your vessels and having a crisis. So very important for people with sickle cell to drink lots of water. And in fact,
very important for everybody to drink lots of water.
Well, that's
you got that right. You absolutely got it right. It's particularly how hot it is these days, but you are right.
Not even when it's hot. Just drink a lot of water.
Period.
Yeah, period.
That's a good health tip. Eat right, drink water. That's going to help you out no matter what you got.
Are you going to be around to answer questions for an hour? Because I'm sure, like I said, every black person I know knows a black person.
There's a beignet in it for you if you stick around.
Well, if you want me to stick around, I'm happy to stick around.
All right. Thank you, Admiral.
Absolutely.
Admiral
Absolutely.
Brett
No problem.